Gwen, we are all ready on this side whenever you're ready to begin.
Great, thank you. We've got another minute or so. See how many people we got in so far.
Say, Gwen, can you see if you can promote Jill Dunn to panelist? I have been trying and I can't get her promoted.
Let me try.
Okay, thank you.
I think I did it.
I'd be happy to accept a demotion if that'd be helpful.
You're too kind.
All right, well, I don't see that she got promoted to panelist. Oh, wait, she is. She's in. All right, very good.
Looks great.
We've got 5 city councilors, so I'm going to give it another couple of minutes. It's just easier to start the meeting with the quorum.
Sounds good.
Oh, Gwen,
Yes.
you hear me? Hi, good morning. So I don't do this very often. So on the Zoom format, do I usually just pull something up on my screen to present, or do we just click on the attachments?
I think if you can share your screen, that seems to work better.
Okay.
So when we have you, you're the second item on the agenda. So yeah, when we get to your item, after kind of introducing it, when you're ready to do presentation, I think just share your screen would be the best. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm sure other people will be coming in. So I'm going to call Administration and Finance Committee of the City of Missoula City Council to order. The date is December 15th, 2021. These are our last committee meetings for this year. We are still holding virtual meetings. So if you would like to join to give public comment, you can go to the city website and go to the meetings and agenda page. Find this meeting, and in the agenda, there is a link to click on to join to give public comment. You can also provide public comment through a couple of other avenues. You can leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 406-552-6012, and you can email us. The email address is council@ci.missoula.mt.us. So thank you, Lisa. If you want to take that down. And if you would do a roll call.
All right.
Thank you.
Let's see. Stacy Anderson. Looks like she's not here yet. Mirta Becerra does not appear to be here. John Contos is out. Heather Hart is gone. Jordan Hess.
Present.
Gwen Jones.
Present.
Julie Merritt.
Present.
Thank you.
Got to do that one last time.
Jesse Ramos. Looks like
He is absent for this meeting.
Amber Sherrill.
Present.
Sandra Vasica. She's absent. Brian von Lossberg.
Here.
And Heidi West. Oh, I got a thumbs up from her on the screen here. Okay.
Present.
Present. Okay. 2, 4, So we have 6 members present at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I will call, we do not yet have a quorum, but I think we will
Oh.
shortly.
Miss Anderson just arrived, so I will go ahead and mark her in.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So noting that we do have a quorum, we have minutes from December 8th, 2022 to approve. Were there any objection to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved, and I will call for public comment on items not on the agenda. We have no attendees in the waiting room, so there is no public comment. So going on with our items of business, 3.1 is appointment to the library board, and I believe we have Mayor John Engen here to introduce his appointee.
Good morning and thank you. Thanks for taking the time this morning. I hope that you will confirm the appointment of, Ms. Mecklenburg-Jackson, if you had a chance to review her application. She is tailor-made for this position, given her experience and passion for libraries. So I hope you'll confirm her appointment.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions from council? Ms. Merritt?
No questions, but I would be happy to make the motion to appoint Lisa Mecklenburg-Jackson to the library board. I've crossed paths with Lisa on the many volunteer activities that she devotes her time to, and truly am grateful for having folks like her in our community. And I know that she will do a great job serving on the library board.
Great, thank you. That motion is in order. I will note that Sandra Vazika is joining the meeting. Are there any other comments or questions from council? Seeing none, I'll call for public comment, but we have no one in our waiting room. So without further ado, we will have a roll call vote on this item.
Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Julie Merritt,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Sandra Vazika,
Yes.
Brian Von Losberg,
Yes, sorry.
and Heidi West.
Yes.
So that is unanimous for all in attendance.
Thank you. That can go on the consent agenda. Thank you for popping in, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next item on the agenda is 3.2, the Missoula Redevelopment Agency fiscal year 2021 budget amendments. We are certainly in budget amendment season, so let's do it. Good morning, Jill. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Like I was just telling Gwen at the beginning of the meeting, I don't do this very often, but once a year I come before you with our annual budget amendments. And so I will do, I think I did a couple years ago, more of a formal PowerPoint thing that simplified, but today I just have my spreadsheets to go over with you. So I want to jump into those. As you know, we have our annual audit. Our audit is independent from the cities. We've done that for my entire tenure here at MRA. So that's been 23 years. And so I think that was just when we first built the first public parking structure downtown, it was important that we had an independent audit. And so the MRA board just kept that going through the years. So we work in conjunction with the city as part of the audit, but ours is independent. We get a separate opinion. We usually do these wrap up annual budget amendments at the end during the audit process. They looking at everything and just making sure there's nothing that comes up, in their review. But what we're doing is recognizing final revenues. You're all familiar with the process of the budget, and you adopt the city's budget prior to the final mill levies being set. And so we use an estimate when we provide our original budget to all of you. And that's just not final because we want to wait for those. We always want to be conservative with that. So we use prior year revenue estimates, and if we're able to get that taxable value in, we plug that in, but we use the prior year's mill levies until those come in. So there's always that true up. And so when I get those final mill levies from the county, Then I adjust our monthly budget reports that are up on our website that are reported to the board every month. And so I adjust those revenues so then we have an accurate picture of what we're getting for revenue for the year. But then, we true these up at the end of the year with the amendments. The other thing that we true up at the end of the year with the amendments is any debt that's been approved by city council during the fiscal year for projects that come before you. And there were 2 debt issuance in fiscal year 2021. And one of them we knew about at the time of budget adoption because it was done in August of 2020, and the other one we didn't. So let me share my screen and we'll just pop over there. But those essentially the mill levies being finalized. So adjusting the revenue to match my monthly budget reports, and the 2 bond issues are pretty much the nature of our budget amendments this year. So that is my intro. Is everybody seeing the spreadsheet?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Looks great.
So I'm going to jump over to the revenue tab, and this is the spreadsheet that I use. I pull these numbers out of Eden's so that it shows the adopted budget. Let me move this over. Look at you. And then I go in and I look at what our final amended budget is when I get the mill levies, and you can see these orange highlighted areas in the amended with the variance. That's kind of really what you're looking for. If you've had a chance to look at these documents already, those are the small changes. And, the mill levies didn't change a whole lot because it wasn't a year that we did revaluation, but there were some adjustments, mostly down because we had some appeals come through. And so, like, for example, here's that first one in Front Street District, or, this particular one. Over here in my notes or description, you'll find the reason for the adjustment. So that's, it's all there. And you can, if you go through, if we just scroll down, you can see a final mill levy set. And here's the bond issue that I was talking about that we didn't get captured when we did the budget last year. This was the council approved bond issue that we issued at completion of the AC Hotel project for the public improvements portion of that. And so that needed to be captured in our budget. Then, of course, there's small fees having to do with debt service. There's final mill levy set. Again, final mill levies are set, adjusting the revenue. And I like to do that because then what ends up in Eden's final matches what I've been using throughout the year as our final revenue numbers. Small adjustment. We did a partial redemption on the bond that we had issued for Scott Street Village. So essentially some monies that weren't able to be utilized for public improvements in the time frame for the bond, we paid that back. So that's what that partial redemption means. Adjustments there. Final mill levies. And these are all of the funds that have to do with MRA development districts and our debt service. So at the very bottom, here's my little reconciliation portion, and over here is our total funds for the district. But nature of the variances, I always sum it up at the bottom. Essentially, all these changes have to do with, revised taxable values having to do with any appeals, mill levies set, and then essentially the AC Hotel, the Series 2021 bond issue, and then there's the partial redemption. So that's my revenue side. Any questions on the revenue side?
Any questions from anyone on council? Double check that I don't have any raised hands. I do not have any raised hands. And if you want to keep going, Jill,
Yep.
I don't know if you've got more, but I want to say this is really clear. I really appreciate your layout here.
Yeah, some people really like the numbers in the spreadsheets, and some it's really confusing. So I will do a simplified kind of PowerPoint, sum up for public hearing. But so here's the revenues, or excuse me, the expenditure side. Again, going through, I highlighted in orange, if there's any changes, of course, they show up in the variance, the adopted to amended. Again, over here, your description of what the change was. It's debts, there's a debt service fund, final revenue adjustments. Here's the AC Hotel on the expenditure side. So when you issue a bond, of course, you've got the revenue coming in, but then you also have the expenditure, so they have to balance. And so there's the AC that was issued. Again, debt service related things that kind of come in and tweak things. The debt service funds typically have just what they need to have in there. So if there's any change on the debt service side for a bond that, maybe they increased the fees or we had some compliance fees, we can't over expend one of those funds. And so the funds just have in there the amount that you anticipate spending. So a lot of times there's some little adjustments on the back end.
Great.
Yeah. So, and the bottom, same kind of thing on the bottom. 2 bond issues, nature of the variances, 2 bond issues, partial redemption, and some compliance fees.
Right.
All I have.
Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. And yeah, as these big projects come online and start paying in and there's bonds attached, it's a big change in the budget. Okay, Mr. Von Lossberg, your hand is raised.
Thanks. No question. I'd just be happy to make the recommended motion to set the public hearing in January. I believe it's January 24th. And could I speak to that?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to use this opportunity, my last set of committee meetings. This is a really easy motion to make. I regret I won't be around in January to vote to approve it. But I want to take the opportunity to just emphasize a couple things. I appreciate Jill mentioning the public improvements aspect of the work with the AC Hotel. That's something we've been trying to stress. These funds don't go to build a hotel. They're associated with public improvements that benefit the public around these things. But more generally speaking, I really appreciate Jill mentioning the independent audit and opinion. And mostly I want to use the opportunity to thank her. Over my entire time, 8 years on council, these updates and amendments and the bookkeeping have always been just crystal clear, completely transparent. They make sense. They're easy to follow. It triggers me a bit when I hear unsupported comments around city finance, transparency issues, because I think this is a perfect example of complete transparency and clarity around these things. And Jill's always done a great job presenting that information and keeping us and the public up to date. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brian. That motion is in order. I would echo your comments. And Jill, it is really clear to understand these. I appreciate this so much. Okay, that motion is on the floor. I will call for public comment. We have no one attending in the attending room, so there is no public comment. Any other comments or questions from council? Okay, I am not seeing any, so we will do a roll call vote for the motion, which is basically setting the public hearing.
Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Julie Merritt,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Sandra Vazika,
Yes.
Brian Von Lossberg,
Yes.
Heidi West.
Yes.
That is unanimous for all in attendance.
Thank you. That can go onto the consent agenda. And thank you, Jill. Appreciate your work on this.
Thank you very much.
The third item on our agenda is 3.3, which is a resolution for final FY 2021 budget amendments. And we have Lee here to present on this. Good morning, Lee.
Good morning. It is the season of budget amendments, isn't it? So I'm going to pull up my screen for folks. Okay. And I wanted to let folks know it's sort of a funny calendar that we have going on right now, but it's simply due to both the audit, as Jill was discussing, as well as the holiday schedule. We have public notice that we have to do, and then we have to set a public hearing. So we're referring these, and of course, not actually bringing them for a public hearing for more than a month. With that being said, I'm going to schedule another ANF meeting in January before the public hearing so that we can go through this process with the new city council, since they will be the ones new members, and that will be the council that will be approving these. And so just to sort of clarify that process for them, because these year-end amendments are really a housekeeping item. But they can be a little confusing for folks walking into it for the first time. So these are our FY21 final budget amendments for the year. And what happens here is, again, as I mentioned, this being a housekeeping item, this is really a matter of truing up our accounting for our audit. Certain entries may have come up due to the audit. Then we just have a lot of items that have, I think almost all of this has come before City Council in one fashion or another. So none of this is really new information. It's not asking for a new project or approval for something that hasn't been previously approved in another fashion via, contract approval. Items were in the CIP, but dollar amounts may have changed. And of course, it's to recognize a lot of funding sources. So this is a 2-page exhibit here of these budget amendments. I did want to call folks' attention to these items here, starting down in the 3000 series of funds. The 3000 series is our debt service funds conforming to governmental accounting. And there are some items in here called arbitrage calculations that we don't bring to council often, usually just at the end of the year. What arbitrage calculations are for is to ensure that we're not making money off of tax exempt debt that we've issued. And it's a very complicated calculation. We actually contract with our financial advisors, Baker Tilly, to run these calculations on debt every year. It's not for every debt. It depends on, when the debt was issued and so forth. So just wanted to bring that up to folks. We don't ever really know how much those arbitrage calculations are going to be. So that's why these invoices and this budget amendment is brought towards the year end when that information comes through. We also have items that were approved in the CIP, such as City Hall remodel. So again, truing up the accounting. This is going to be covered by transfers from impact fees. We have capital lease proceeds you'll see throughout here for FY22. We will be issuing a capital lease early next calendar year to cover a lot of these projects that were previously discussed during the CIP process way back in the FY21 budget process. Quite a few bit more relating to those capital projects. I also wanted to let folks understand that we have to actually amend the budget for non-cash expenses. And this goes back to, we are just truing up the accounting. So depreciation you'll see throughout here, and sometimes it's a pretty large dollar amount, but there's no actual money paid for depreciation. But to conform with proper accounting, we actually have to book it as an expense. And then we had a new GASB statement that came out, GASB 84, and we had to account for some of our fiduciary or agency funds a little differently. And so we just closed out some of those funds. These are funds where we hold the money for others. You can see court collected parking fines, sewer rebates, residential inspection funds. We also hold some funds for municipal court that gets sent up to the state, and those are all what are considered agency or fiduciary funds. And this resolution will increase revenues for FY21 by 4.2 million and expenditures for FY21 by 8.9 million. We brought the resolution. Apologies, I'm not sure what the advertisement dates are, so we have those highlighted in yellow in here. And again, I'm hoping to bring this back to an ANF in January, prior to that public hearing on January 24th. And so I'm asking this council to set that public hearing. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lee. And I did want to note the documents were not attached until this morning, but we're on a bit of a accelerated schedule because we are taking 2 weeks off. So I know Lee wanted to get this in, start the clock ticking on the public hearing. So the documents, she just went over them, the attachments, and I think by having another ANF meeting in January, that would be great to just have the new council really get their eyes on it. Okay, given that, are there any questions from council regarding this? Brian?
No questions, but I'm happy to make the motion for the public hearing.
Very good, thank you. That motion is in order, and I will call for public comment, and we have no one attending to give public comment. So back to council. Any other questions or comments from council? And John Contos, good to see you. I hope you're feeling better. Okay, any other comments or questions from council? Brian, is your hand still raised?
I just raised it again.
Okay.
I just wanted to make the same opportunity for thanks to Lee along the lines of what I mentioned earlier. So thank you, Lee.
Great, thank you. All righty, with no one to give public comment and no other comments or questions from council, we will have a roll call vote on this item.
Stacy Anderson,
Yes.
John Contos,
Yes.
Jordan Hess,
Yes.
Gwen Jones,
Yes.
Julie Merritt,
Yes.
Amber Sherrill,
Yes.
Sandra Vasica,
Yes.
Brian Von Losberg,
Yes.
Heidi West.
Yes.
Unanimous for everyone in attendance.
Thank you. That can go on the consent agenda. And thank you, Lee, for all of the good information today. We will see you in January. All right, the last item on our agenda is 3.4, amendments to council rules. And we have Marty Rabine, City Clerk, here to present on this. And I can say that Brian, Jordan, myself, and Marty have been working on this, I want to say since June. It's been a long time.
February.
Oh my goodness. All righty. Well, there you go. Anyway, Marty is a font of institutional knowledge in the city. She knows it all. She's been through numerous rule iterations. So we're going to start off with Marty giving a great presentation on all of this to kind of create some context for everyone.
Morning, City Council members. So City Council rules have not been amended in any substantive way, I will say, since 2012. We did make a slight amendment during the pandemic to switch meeting time from 7 o'clock to 6 p.m. But other than that, we haven't looked at them in quite a long time. And when we do our orientation with City Council members, when you come on, this is the first document that we encourage you to read because it sets the framework for how the council conducts its business. It's very foundational. And a lot of these rules, there's about 32 of them, are born of past issues and struggles and needed clarifications from times when council needed a structure to consider different types of matters. So the track changes version of the rules is very red, and I am not going to show that this morning. I'm going to show a version that just shows the comments that indicate the types of changes and kind of what it looks like. But you do have a track changes version, I hope, attached to your agenda. So if you want to take a look at the massive amounts of changes in red line and strikeout that have been made to the rules, you're welcome to follow along with that particular version. And I'm not going to go through every single change because some of it is just clarifying language, but I am going to try to hit the high points and do a little bit of a summary for what we're proposing here. As Gwen mentioned, Jordan, Gwen, Brian, and I started meeting about City Council rules back in February. And we took a little hiatus over the summer during the budget and then picked them back up this fall. And so I've been very happy to have their interest and participation in City Council rules. As I always say, nobody cares about the rules until they care about the rules. All right, here we go. All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Can everybody see the City Council rules for conduct of business with Rule 1 up here at the top? Yes, can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see
All
that.
right.
Yep.
All right. Let's talk about what we did in City Council Rule number 1 first. So we changed the procedures for setting the annual meeting schedule. So normally this is a referral to City Council, and the proposal here is that the council president and the city clerk will work out the council schedule. We were very prescriptive in the past version of the rules about the dates of the meetings. It was going to be the first 4 Mondays of the month. And we found out when we had a pandemic that technically we pretty much broke that rule all to pieces. And so we have a strive to hold here, and we set the calendar, but we've allowed a little bit more flexibility based on our experience there. We have developed down here some rules for remote participation, and they reflect our current practice. They state that council members are expected to participate in person unless there is some sort of emergency, like a pandemic or a family emergency, or maybe council chambers or another facility being under construction and council chambers being used for another purpose. That might happen. And in which case that virtual meetings might be required. But generally, this rule anticipates that council members will attend meetings in person, even when we go back to hybrid. There is a provision in this rule for a council member to request via email to participate remotely for a finite period of time. And that is similar to Council Rule number 29 when you go out of town for a period of over 10 days. So Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure has been updated. There's a new version in 2020. And so the reason why I bring this up is that version of Mason's includes a lot of recommended language for how you do remote or hybrid meetings. And I am happy to say that when we set up our hybrid meetings, we ticked these boxes, including having 800 numbers for folks who might have to pay toll charges to participate because the numbers are long distance. We set that up from the get-go here at the City of Missoula. And so basically we're bringing forward the procedures and best practice recommendations associated with having hybrid meetings, about how you establish the quorum, how you call on folks, and how votes are taken in a virtual environment. And I was really proud of us when I read that rule and was like, wow, we did all those things. Good job, us. All right. Gwen, do you guys want to interject as we go through here, or do you want to kind of summarize at the end if you have comments to add?
I think you should keep going because you're doing a great, clear job. And I have a few comments, but I think you go ahead. You just keep plowing forward. Well, let me ask, does anyone have questions first? Are there any questions? Let me just double check here. Jordan.
I don't have a question, but I think it might be helpful to take questions as we go through it. If that's okay with you.
That's fine. I can hold my comments till the end because honestly, Marty is saying things that I would say, so I'd rather let her go with the flow. But questions, Brian.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Would you mind if I think that there's enough material that it might be timely while we've just covered this section to maybe touch on sort of intent or something like that, but I will defer to your judgment.
Well, if you have thoughts and want to, as we go through, just raise your hand if you want to comment on it. There is a lot here. We got a lot more to go through. I think Marty's covering a lot of the intent, but if you want to add on, Brian?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I just wanted to highlight one aspect of this relative to illness, because I think it's a really important thing for people to understand part of what we went through in these rules. In the past, if you were sick, you had a choice, and I'm not talking about COVID necessarily or something. I'm just saying in general, if you were sick, you really had a choice of either you had to be there in person to participate in the process and represent your constituents, and potentially infect everybody, or you didn't have that opportunity. And so I just wanted to underscore, this is really, I think, an improvement where if we've learned anything from the pandemic in general around illness, is that we really want people to be as thoughtful as possible about what they potentially expose others to. And at the same time, we don't want to disenfranchise elected officials from representing their constituents. So I think this strikes a really good balance between encouraging, the in-person attendance, and at the same time recognizing that we should have learned something through all of this and continue to learn something. And if you're sick, provide people an opportunity to still represent their constituents while being safe. So thanks.
Well, and I would add on to that. This is why it took 12 months to do the rules. It sounds simple and it's complicated. Currently, we are allowed in the state of Montana to be having virtual meetings, which we never had that option prior to the pandemic. The door is now opened. And I think we did the best we could with the rules with what we know at this point in time. We don't know how long the pandemic will continue. We don't know how long under Montana law we'll be able to continue to have virtual meetings. My sense is, I think we're in a new era, but we're trying to do the best we can with the information we have at this point to write a good rule, while keeping in mind that honestly, in person is best. And that is a priority in the long run, but factors have to come together to allow us to be in person, while we still have the flexibility for allowing for some virtual remote participation for good reasons. So that's the balance we're trying to strike. Any other comments, or Marty, we'll just go back to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll add on to Brian's comment that we've had council members who have been undergoing cancer treatments as well. So it's not only illness. Sometimes you have a really hard day after chemo, but you could pop virtually into an F committee and listen to me drone on about the rules. And so I think this rule enables that type of participation as well, not just the case of illness. Let's talk about rule number two. It's citizen participation in decision making. I think we pulled a lot of content up from rules that came later and just kind of coalesced it all here into one citizen participation in decision making. The procedures for taking public comment I thought were hard to read, so I put them in a table. Here's how it works on the consent agenda. Here's how it works on public hearings, et cetera, et cetera. How it works in committees. And so just kind of a reframing to reflect our current practices, and really not much new content here, just kind of presented a little differently.
Well, and I'll add there also, a priority is that we perceived it as a best practice to really take all public comment prior to council having parliamentary debate. So with public hearings, with everything, we should be hearing all public comment before really voicing an opinion on it. So we tried to clarify that in the presentation here, because it's been a bit muddled the last year, I would say. Sandra?
Thanks. I have a concern about how we are taking public comment. I guess I don't really like how we, it's not like really a question and answer type thing. I didn't know that the public is really frustrated when their questions aren't answered. So I guess that's more of a comment than a question, but I just wanted to make that that concern known.
Thanks. Yeah, I understand. I understand your concern. I don't know that there's a better way to address it, but let's keep it on the duly noted list. Julie?
We actually follow that procedure because it's in compliance with the Montana open meeting laws. We're not allowed to have back and forth with people over items that are not on our agenda because they have not been publicly noticed. So there's this very specific reason why we don't generally answer people's questions about stuff that's not on the agenda. When they ask questions about agenda items, if we do generally try and answer their questions, or if those answers are not immediately available, we ask staff to get those answers and follow up with that. But if it's a non-agenda item, we're doing it to stay in compliance with state law.
Thanks, Julie. And we do also provide the opportunity council may ask a question then following up on that if it's perceived to be relevant and substantive. But yeah, there's some hard issues trying to always balance it. Were there any other comments or questions? Jordan.
Well, I think this is a really good time to highlight what Marty was saying at the beginning, that we have rules to set sideboards. I think oftentimes committee chairs will relax some of the interpretations of the rules in order to have a more free-flowing meeting, or in order to accommodate the public, or but we have rules for when we have edge cases that need rules, I guess. And so I think it's a point well taken, Sandra, and I think we have some discretion to handle that, but then we have the rules for a more problematic scenario.
Great. Sandra?
Thanks. This really clarified things. And Julie, you made a lot of good points there. So I really appreciate it. I'm less concerned now. So thank you.
Great.
I'll just add that I have seen council members, particularly during public hearings, where, sometimes a citizen will get up, Sandy, and they'll give public comment, but they'll ask a question, and then I've seen council members repeat that question and say, "Oh, I heard that Sandy had a question about this," and then maybe ask a case planner or the staff member, "Can you respond to that?" And if you have a little information about it, you might embellish. But I've also seen council members asking questions to which they already know the answer. That's another tool that you have of staff members to elicit a response. And so that's like a subtle, elegant way to get their questions answered during the process. So a couple of tools, and I will note, unfortunately, Amber, Sandy, and John got like 2 months of in-person experience, and then it's all been virtual ever since. Great job, you guys. Great job. Shirt changed John and Amber to a certain degree, I believe. Yeah. Can we move on to rule 3 and 4? All right. So rule 3 and 4, I covered these together. They used to be part of another rule, and we felt they were under public hearings. And seriously, ex parte communications and decorum at meetings require their own rules. They are all the time in the case of decorum, and in the case of ex parte communications, don't just apply to public hearings. So for the viewing public who are watching ex parte communications, when the city council is making land use decisions, that is very specific land use decisions. Somebody's asked to rezone their property or subdivide land that they might own or have an interest in. Both the members of the public in the neighborhood or interested parties and the person who's asking council to make a decision, city council winds up in a quasi-judicial role rather than a legislative role. And we talk about this during council orientation. And so there's an expectation under law that city council members will have an appearance of fairness. And so that means that all of the conversation about that project should be taking place in the public record or if there's stuff that occurs outside the public record, it should be entered into the public record. So we do this during training, and we call this out as a specific rule unto itself. Decorum at meetings, we did update this, and we updated it. So it used to have, it applies to everybody. So staff, city council, and citizens. And we used to have this language right here that I'm highlighting. It says use of loud, threatening, abusive, indecent, profane language disturbs, disrupts, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting. And the new version of Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure has expanded decorum quite a bit. And so the proposal here is to adjust our decorum at meetings and bringing forward some of the language from Mason's section 122. So it talks about comments being germane to the agenda item under consideration, that they be concise. The old rule said that it indicates concern for an issue, so that's just being kept. Here's the new stuff that we get from Masons. Indulgent personalities impugn the motives of members. And then we also pulled forward this language: persistent, person who resorts to persistent irrelevance or persistent repetition. So in order to have this ruled out of order, City Council would bring the chair's attention to the fact that there might be persistent irrelevance or persistent repetition. And then at the discretion of the presiding officer, that can be ruled out of order. And then we've always had the power of recess or adjourn if a meeting does start to really go sideways. And we've executed that. We've exercised that option where the mayor's banged the gavel and temporarily recessed the meeting until we can get order restored. And so we've just brought that forward into the rule. So that's rules 3 and 4.
Marty, can you define no person may indulge in personalities?
Personalities would be Marty Rabine is a total idiot for thinking this. You can say an appropriate way to say that would be Marty Rabine's idea is idiotic. So do you see how I took my idea being idiotic from the personhood? That's an example.
Okay, thank you. So it really kind of gets to the personal attack concept.
Yes, it's the name calling rather than attribution to the idea being not appropriate. It says that I'm an idiot for my opinion rather than saying that my opinion is.
Great. Okay. Thanks for spelling that out. We do have some questions here. Julie Merritt.
Thanks. Marty, can you scroll back up so we can see that whole paragraph under ex parte communications? And I'm really reluctant to second guess you all with the amount of time that I know that you have spent on this, but I'm curious about that first sentence where the only 2 types of applications you call out are subdivision or zoning decisions. And if that's what we really mean, is that those are the only 2 types of decisions that this applies to. And because in my mind, that can also be conditional use decisions and some other types of decisions that we've made. So I wonder if we want to have a more generic term that covers land use decisions so that nobody can point back to this and say, well, it says only those 2 types.
I can answer that question, I hope. So conditional use is a part of your zoning amendment, so I would consider that to be a zoning decision. I do agree that zoning decision may be too encapsulating because You are not under the rules of ex parte, for example, when you were considering cannabis regulations, when you're considering zoning regulatory amendments or subdivision regulatory amendments. This supply, it does say property owner applications for. So yeah, I think I thought we covered that. We did go into some depth about that, but I'm amenable to additional language if you think it offers more clarity, because we're not perfect.
Well, I'm taking some notes. City Attorney Jim Nugent might also have some more insight. On this specific topic of subdivision and zoning, does anyone else raise your hand like this? Because I'll stay on this topic as I go. Okay, Heidi, and then Jordan.
So
We'll come back and circle through everyone else.
Okay. I had a similar comment, just for those of us who were on council during the Merck decision. We were also in an ex parte or in a quasi judicial rule, and I don't remember what bucket that fell under when we were discussing that project. So maybe if you could just remind me if that is covered by these two definitions.
So that was a part of your zoning code that pertained to
application for demolition.
Applications for demolition under the historic preservation ordinance.
Okay.
Also encapsulated as part of zoning, but it didn't appear. That doesn't appear on its face. Like when you, I'm picking up what you're putting down, Heidi.
Well, and just as a practical matter, I think oftentimes when something is coming through council that will be under this umbrella, but is not readily apparent between the LUP chair and city attorney, there should be a communication to council that we are now underneath Rule 3 and to pay attention. But okay, Jordan, you had your hand raised regarding this.
Thanks. We could add something, or other land use entitlements or other decisions involving private property rights, or something that's kind of a catch-all that might address that. And I wanted to note also that I'm taking notes on these things. So even if we don't resolve them today, we can, I appreciate these issues being flagged, and I'm taking a record on them.
Thanks. I'm taking notes also, and I am not looking for amendments today. This is simply to get this council's input on rules based on their experience, and then the new council in January will be substantively discussing and passing these. So voting on it, I should say. Okay, next we had Brian.
Thanks. Last little bit on that part that I thought was helpful when I heard Marty say it was to actually provide the contrast where she, quasi judicial as opposed to legislative intent. So one thing to consider adding was just that slight little change of the difference. I think it helps to understand the difference by naming what it's different from, which is sort of our normal legislative rule.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay, Stacy.
I actually, I know you were trying to finish up the section, and my question is not around the ex parte communication. Mine's more on decorum. So I want to give you an opportunity to finalize any comment or questions on this section first.
Okay, Sandra, I see your hand raised. Was that on Rule 3? You're muted. We can't hear you, Sandra. You're muted.
Mine was on Rule 4 as well. So I'll let
Okay. Stacy, go ahead then.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Really fruitful discussion. Appreciate all the work. I guess I appreciate bringing in the specific language on decorum. I appreciate also the Marty's example. However, if I were chair and someone said that Marty's idea was idiotic, I would probably take umbrage with that. And because I feel as though in current climate that we need to elevate decorum back to where it should be. And I guess maybe this is the yeah, my personal feeling, but I, wonder if there's any way to strengthen this language a little bit. I also wonder in regards to, I find myself frustrated often with certain people commenting about various city employees and not naming names, but just naming departments and accusing them of outlandish things that would be illegal, and multiple times doing that on the record, and really feel as though that I think it's highly inappropriate that we continue to give a space for that, those lies to be perpetuated in a public space on the record that's being broadcast out. And I'm just wondering if there is an opportunity in here to address this. And I see that you're highlighting impugns motives of members. So would that apply? I mean, members to me, I consider that the 12 of us plus the mayor. Does that also kind of broadcast over other departments in the city?
Noted. I think we could expand members.
Okay, great. Yes.
Yeah. At the beginning, it discusses city council members, the mayor, city staff, and the public are all required to follow. So there is a broad umbrella there.
Right. But I guess I'm getting at the whole, like, the public is impugning not members on the body that's sitting in front of, but just, say the police department for once, accusing them of, unlawful acts that we know to not be the case, or, repeatedly accusing them with no basis and of knowledge to that. And it's just, it's been something that's been repeated numerous times. And I just really don't feel like our public comments section of our agenda should be an outlet for perpetuating accusations and lies.
Duly noted. And another thought I will add to that, and I think for right now, we're just going to take comments and we're making a list, and then we've got time to chew on it. And in January, readdress these things. I wonder if we could have a sentence about how we strive to be professional in the tone and conduct of the meeting. And if that would be another tool for when it's going off the rails. So I'll just put that. I think the word professional has certain connotations. So you don't call someone's idea idiotic. You say, I don't see merit in the idea. And I think maybe if we could steer it in that direction, it would be better. Just a thought. Okay, I'm going to keep going through. Thank you, Stacy. You're done, Stacy? I assume she is. Okay.
Yes,
Sandra.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Sandra.
Thanks. I'm kind of going a different direction with this. While I agree that the public shouldn't accuse the staff or departments, I think that as elected officials, we are held to a higher standard, and we should be able to take public calling us idiots. So I think it's I don't think it's appropriate for us to ask the public to I know that we should ask them to, watch your language, not curse at us, but we should be able to accept them calling like me an idiot or stuff like that. So and it's also kind of really confusing in the rules, especially I'm glad that Gwen asked the question to explain what that meant in what was that? Indulge in personalities. I don't think any member of the public is going to be expected to understand what that means. So I know that we're just taking notes here, but I don't really like that part of the rule here. I think I'm done with that. All right, thanks.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Amber.
Yeah, actually, my comment was similar and different than Sandra's. I agree. I think that personalities thing is a very strange wording that's hard to really understand. I mean, and I'm sorry, this is really small and I only have one screen, but the personal attack piece, I think, I don't know if maybe that makes more sense is some language around that. I don't like the language of indulge in personalities. That sounds like they're doing renditions of someone to me. So that is one piece. And, you know, I also think I do disagree with Sandra that I think that saying that they disagree with what we're doing is very different than personal attacks. Again, I mean, calling someone an idiot is that's just not productive, and we're trying to get work done here. And I agree with Stacy. I'm trying not to be super repetitive with what everyone's saying, but I'm looking at this and, you know, where are we addressing, I guess, the, and maybe it's not in this section, how we deal with people that are just going on and on about totally inaccurate things. How do we, the inaccuracies and the misinformation piece, maybe we're not going to deal with those in the rules, but I'm curious about that.
That's a good point. So we have 30 minutes left and we're on rule 4, but lots of good. I want to go through the last two people who've raised their hands and then move forward, because this is some of the denser stuff. So this is hard to get through, but good comments. Okay, Heidi.
So I think I agree with Amber on indulgent personalities and impugn motives of members. I think both of those are kind of thick in the wording, and I do think it's appropriate to have those I mean, I know that I've been personally, like, people have made comments on my parenting, for example, during public meetings, which is completely off base and not on the agenda. So I think it's important, and I guess, but I think different language could make it more clear. And then my second question is, I guess, does this reset at every meeting? So, like, does every, you know, if there's repeat offenders, do they at every meeting, it's a blank slate and they get to try again? Or is there a point at which it's like, okay, well, you know, like we were 10 meetings in and we have the same issue over and over. I guess, I don't know if there's language for cumulative, I guess, effect maybe of repeat offenses, if that makes sense.
Oh, good point. Thank you. Julie Merritt.
Yeah, I think we should try and prevent the public from calling us names. I mean, idiot is one thing that may not be very offensive, but I think it's not a far step from there to calling someone retarded, for example, which is a very offensive word to use. So I think we need to be pretty clear about that. People can disagree with us, and we can have an expectation from the public that they disagree with us in still a professional manner, and resorting to name calling I don't think should be tolerated.
Thanks for that. And one last thought, and then we're going to keep going with Marty. I do think it's a slippery slope, and these are our tools, and it is the tone that we set and the culture that we create within our meetings, and we should lead on that. And there's plenty of other arenas out in social media for people to call us all sorts of names. So they certainly have that right, but we get to decide how our meetings will run and what kind of tone and culture and environment we have. And so anyway, duly noted, lots of great comments on Rule 4, which is a big one in an unusual era that we are living through. So good to have it. Okay, back to you, Marty.
Thank you. I'm going to skip Rule 5 because we didn't do anything with that one. That's the law. That's the Constitution. Number 6 has to do with parliamentary authority. And you might have guessed that Marty's kind of a fan of the newest version of Mason's Manual Legislative Procedure. So updating us from, let's see, on my desk here, I have the 2000 version of Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure. And I'm recommending that we adopt the 2020 version edition of Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure as kind of the group of rules that sits over here when these rules that we're talking about don't address matters. So this is how motions get made, the fact that you don't make seconds. That sort of stuff hasn't changed, but I did like the stuff that it talked about with respect to particularly virtual meetings. And it also includes updates to parliamentary procedures based on case law. And so working with a 21-year-old set of rules, there's been a few court cases that have influenced the way legislative bodies across the United States and indeed the world operate. And so those have been incorporated in the latest version of the rule. So just proposing to adopt the latest version of Mason's Manual Legislative Procedure. If you do this, we'll buy a book. We have an electronic, I have access to an electronic copy right now. Make sure Nugent has one. Nothing there. All right, let's move on to Rule 10. A little substance here, a little substance to change for Rule 10. We reordered the order of business for City Council meetings. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them here in depth, some of the major changes that we made. We clarified the public comment is on non-agenda items. That's the state law. Number 4, because it just used to say scheduled committee meetings. Technically, we're announcing them because they've already been scheduled and noticed the Friday before because we're publishing the committee agendas now. That's something that we didn't do the last time we looked at these rules. This is a time when the council president would announce committee membership appointments or committee chairs if you've got a subcommittee, somebody wants to go on or come off. And it is also a time when a chair could note that there might be a change to a committee agenda, which is current practice. Then we get into the consent agenda. Then we get into comments from staff, agencies, boards, commissions, the community forum, etc. Special presentations. I added the word proclamations because that seems to be the content of special presentations mostly. And here's the big deal. We are moving final consideration up. So right now it happens after public hearings, and we are proposing to move it up earlier in the agenda. When I first started working at the city council, sent everything back to committee, and all the public hearing stuff came out under final consideration. And this was its position on the agenda. And the reason why was that we'd had a public hearing on this matter. And so this kind of got these agenda items talked about and decided earlier in the meeting, just acknowledging that the public hearing had happened, and it also frees the staff members who might be on this item up a little bit earlier in the agenda. So that's the reason for that. Then we have public hearings. The rest of the order of business is pretty normal. Between comments and miscellaneous communications, we are missing items to be referred. I am recommending that council do this, and there's a couple of reasons that I'm recommending it. So originally, items to be referred, the reason why this was placed on the council's agenda was it was a radar screen. The city council didn't create a committee schedule, didn't publish committee agendas, and so this was a way to notice items that were going to be taken up in committees. And now it's become a source of confusion. And let me explain. It's a little outdated now that we publish both a committee schedule and the committee agendas. We started doing that when we got our legislative software. So we published both the council agenda and the committee agendas and the committee schedule, which is attached to both the council agenda and available via a link on our website. We do that all on Friday afternoon now. What we have seen is that having items to be referred listed on your agenda often means that new reporters who don't know about your business process see that you have an item to be referred on the agenda, and they say, oh, the city council is going to take up the water rate increases on Monday. And all we're trying to do is get it in committee. So I have affectionately coined this one the put the agenda item where it goes, amendment to the rules, so that we can avoid confusing folks to think that you're going to take up something when all it is intended as this radar screen. So the other thing is that when we started publishing committee agendas, we kind of made up your order of business. And so we're formalizing that in the rule here. Then, as always, you can take things up out of order as long as nobody objects. So that is the sum total of my thoughts on Rule 10.
Great. I see no hands raised.
I saw a lot of head nodding on that items to be referred. You all have been the recipient, I'm sure, of those questions.
We need to do the hand clap. Okay.
Okay. I think our admin team will be really happy too, because it's an extra step in their process in getting things on the getting things to committee. So we'll be doing some training if that holds in these rule amendments. Rule number 11, just been reformatted a little bit here and updated to reflect the new order of business we just talked about. Rule 12, we changed the referral deadline for the closing of the agenda to reflect our current practice. We have an agenda deadline now of 5 o'clock on Thursday rather than noon on Friday. That just gives the admin team a chance to do their best work in getting the agenda prepared. Our office does take late items on an individual basis, depending on factual circumstances. But we endeavor and hope to get agenda items completed by 5 o'clock on Friday, by 5 o'clock on Thursday, so that we can publish the council and committee agendas on Friday. And we've allowed the chair to create an exception to that rule in extraordinary circumstances. Any comments on Rule 12?
Not seeing any raised hands.
All right, let's talk about rule number 13. The proposal here is to add additional routine matters that do not need to be referred to committee. So I'll highlight the ones that have changed. I'm not going to cover the ones that already exist, all right? And this reflects some current practice, actually. Lately, staff have been bringing resolutions of intent to annex and zone. The adoption of that resolution intention, which essentially sets up your public hearing. Those have been landing on your consent agenda. So we're proposing formalizing that practice. We're proposing to expand first readings and scheduling of public hearings on all zoning matters. So previously, it was just the ones that are subject to ex parte communications. That is the ones that get scheduled at planning board and city council. So it's actually a land use application. And we are proposing to extend that to zoning amendments as well. That basically Laval Means team doesn't need to come in and request first reading in LUMP, bring it forward to council. Those can go straight on to the consent agenda. And that has been a current practice. Noise waivers. I've never seen you guys deny a noise waiver permit in 30 years. Usually it's related to some construction that's pretty legit. It's mostly related to city operations, sometimes the private sector. They still need to be approved by council, but we're proposing to not have them go to committee. All bylaws, you had to take up the food policy board bylaws the other day in committee. This would just give a path for those to go straight to the consent agenda. And finally, firefighter and police confirmations. So the sideboards around that is that it has to be recommended by the mayor and the respective fire or police chief. So any comments on those matters? And I'm amenable if you want to add anything else to this. So
We've got a raised hand, Ms. Anderson.
Thanks so much. I'm fine with the firefighter and police kind of not having to come through committee because, as you stated, there's procedures in back. I am wondering if this is the section to address the two things, if the chair will allow me. First of all, I think we should, in my personal opinion, things on the consent agenda should actually be voted on unanimously. And I know that we've kind of dibble dabbled back and forth between not having things that were unanimously voted on the consent agenda and things, and then it's kind of at the discretion of the chair. And I just think that that's a bad practice because the intent of the consent agenda is that everything was voted on unanimously, and that there isn't then an opportunity for, if there isn't unanimity consent or on it, unanimous, gosh, I can't talk, on it, to have the reasons why. And it just becomes very kind of, in my opinion, one-sided, of whoever it is that didn't want it to be voted on gets an opportunity to say why, and there isn't then the flip side of what it is, a presentation. I know it is more onerous for staff, but I feel like it's an important part of kind of being transparent and letting the public know what it is that we are talking about. So don't know if that is the point, or this is the spot for that. The other thing that I've noticed that I don't really love is that we have started within land use. I know that we're, trying to evolve with the pandemic, and, fingers crossed we won't be in a position like this for much longer. But it used to be that the first time that we heard a land use proposal from staff was in committee, and then it would go to council. And then because we are trying to make sure that there's plenty of opportunity for feedback, we have left things open for an additional week during the pandemic while we're meeting remotely, which I absolutely am in favor of. What I've noticed is now at some point, and I'm not quite sure when the change happened, we're starting to hear, the first time we hear a land use thing is on Monday night, then we hear it in committee on Wednesday for a second time, and then we hear it for a final time the following Monday. And the concern I have with that is I would really like the first time for it to be presented to be in land use planning committee. I think that that's the intent of the committee. And I think that we're all very much focused on land use when we're in land use committee, and we're not, the time is allotted for that to ask questions, dive in, really pay attention. We're not also having to juggle all the various things that are on the agenda on a Monday night, which can run the gamut of topic matter. So I'm just wondering, and I see Jordan, the chair of the Land Use Planning Committee, has his hand up, and so I'm curious on thoughts on that. But I just, since we're talking about the agenda, wanted to voice a couple concerns I have. No, we're not taking amendments. No, we're taking notes, but wanted to put that out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think those are bigger discussions for right now. We're issue spotting basically and making those lists. But thank you for that. Amber.
Yeah, if Jordan had a response to Stacy, I'd be happy.
Jordan, were you going to speak to it? Or
yeah, just really briefly, I think that was something that we did change deliberately, and we did want to revisit it. And so I think it would be useful to have that discussion in land use and planning to talk about procedure and have a good discussion on pros and cons, and because Stacy, you bring up good points, so I'm happy to schedule that in the new year.
Thank you. Amber.
Okay, thanks. And I agree with Stacy. It seems I like actually seeing the land use and planning items in committee before it goes to the full council meeting for those same reasons. So talking about that next year is fine. My question is actually around the bylaws for committees. Could someone explain in a little more detail what the purpose of kind of not fast tracking, that makes it sound nefarious somehow, but moving that through? I mean, I think that it was important that we review the bylaws for the food coalition, and I'm just wondering about the thoughts behind that.
I think that By the time bylaws get to you, Amber, in the case of the Food Policy Board, they had been already approved by the Food Policy Board. They had been reviewed by the county commissioners. They had been reviewed by the county attorney. So if you were to make amendments to those bylaws, they would have to go back through all those channels. And that is the case with most bylaws that come to you for approval. And largely they're a mechanism of the board, the board's creating documents that says that you'll approve their bylaws, but it really has been a pro forma review rather than a substantive review. I think the opportunity for council to weigh into many bylaws is at the point that they're being drafted. And so in the case of the Food Policy Board, the council does have membership and appointees to that. And that's where you'd probably have your most impact on a set of bylaws rather than at the point of where they're coming to you for final approval. So that's what I'll add there. I know when the neighborhood office was in our office, for example, a neighborhood council might have worked on a set of bylaws for 2 years to get them square with what the city attorney wanted. They were only meeting a couple of times a year. Finally, they get them approved. And if there were corrections or changes at the point they got to city council, they can't come onto the agenda without the approval of an attorney to ensure that they comply with the law and the Constitution. So that's where I'll leave that. And that's why I'm proposing that they come straight to the consent agenda rather than in committee.
Yeah, may I have a follow-up, Gwen?
Sure, go ahead.
And this is just a comment. I mean, I noticed that I felt like that was clunky because I did have an amendment to the food policy, just a clarification, but a clarification I felt was kind of an important one. And you know, Heidi and I chatted about it, and it's all going to be taken care of and fine ultimately, but it's just, yeah, that's a little clunky to me because it was really, we couldn't make the change on the fly there. And I do think that it's the purpose of those boards are something that's really important to us as a body, and they're advisory boards for us. And I think we treat them as such. And I certainly treat them as some of the experts that are advising me on what to do. And so, yeah, I don't love that, but I don't have any great amendment or thought on a better way to do it either right now. So.
Yeah, and I think the amendment that you were actually looking at is a foundational thing in their founding document, their founding resolution. Their bylaws, you can think about those as similar to the city council's rules, their operations, their procedures. And so often boards will include some of their founding language in their bylaws. I'm not a super duper big fan, but we do it in council rules too. Open meetings. But yeah, I agree, but sometimes it's language in the bylaws. So if you change their foundational documents, they're going to have a change that'll be in order in their bylaws. Because I think that the things that you guys had talked about are things that related to their appointments and their membership and clarifying the CFAC member, correct? So
it was more who appointed it, but that's fine. We can move on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. Put it on the list of issues to discuss further. Heidi.
On it.
So I guess I feel like the fifth one, request for waivers of noise ordinance for routine construction. I know that the scenarios we've seen always get approved, but I guess with that language, it sounds like it's an automatic approval for any sort of routine construction. And so I could see like someone building, a fourplex infill project being like, oh, it's going to be automatically approved. I think there could be some like more nuance on what kind of construction we're looking at, because I understand on road projects, and those sorts of things where you're trying to really, have less impact on commuting, for example, that those would be approved, but I could see situations where it shouldn't be automatic. Does that make sense? But I love the intent. So I think it just needs some language cleanup or maybe some more defining.
Great. Duly noted. We've got about 10 more minutes, so I want to keep going here, but thank you. Duly noted. Back to you, Marty.
Okay. We don't get into much substance until we get down here to Rule 16 about public hearings. And this is where we formalize the act of final consideration and make it standard practice. And this is where we pulled ex parte communications out of. And I'll just move right on to rule number 17. There's been some question about what happens when the city council president is the presiding officer and they vote and there's a tie. And so this clarifies that that person only gets one vote. That's out of case law. So if that question's come up, we're just going to answer it straightforward in the rules here. And same with reconsideration. In the past, somebody's, I answer this question almost every time, or Jim does, about reconsideration. Of course, reconsideration needs to be introduced into meetings. It has to be done by somebody who voted on the prevailing side, and it requires 2/3 of vote. But the question is always, what if I make a motion to reconsider? Then what does that mean? And it means that it's a complete do-over. Okay, so that's what we're clarifying here in the rules, that it means the entire matter is before you for consideration. Okay. Let's talk about rule number 20. Oh, I guess it's rule number 19 here. Hang on, I wrote it. My note says 20. It says simplified what can happen with a committee recommendation. Hang on. Something.
I think we wanted to talk about the creation of subcommittees and clarification there. That was the substantive change C.
Yeah. So substantive change here. Actually, we didn't do a lot with the creation of subcommittees, Gwen, but I just want to highlight that you do have the power of subcommittee. And so occasionally, for example, board chairs, if you all get in a pinch with trying to fit in appointments in addition to all the regular business that departments and work groups are bringing to you, that you do have the power of a subcommittee. And so we have used that in the past. And so I want to just put a pin in this, that you have the power of forming a subcommittee specific to an issue, appointments, or other issues. And here's how you do it. You have a definite start and an end time. You define the purpose of the committee, who can vote on it, and a timeline. And then any council member can join. Can request to join a subcommittee, but this is a way to handle business with a focused effort, and so we'll just go through that. We didn't make much change to anything related to committee appointments, or how you select your chairs, or how you vote, or absences, or much with committee reports at all. Absences, removing items, we just didn't make a lot of changes here. Under Rule 20, we simplified what can happen with a committee recommendation. And hang on, I'm going to make some edits here to my notes. So we simplified what can happen to a committee recommendation right here. And for some reason, my note went away. on this, but this used to go into a lot of detail about tie votes, and we found it confusing to read. So just clarifying that committee, approve, deny, refer, defer with no recommendation. And just FYI, if you have a tie vote in committee, that's a fail, comes out with a do not pass. Unless you forward it to the floor without a recommendation, you can also do that. Okay. And we didn't have a rule for how new business got on the agenda. I was kind of surprised. But there's a proposed rule here about how you can get an item of new business. It's got to be urgent. It's got to be placed by the mayor or a committee chair. And then I have a suggested amendment I'm hoping you'll take up here, and that is to make this rule subject to rule number 12 of closing of the agenda. That is that new business gets submitted before 5 o'clock on Thursday. So that's a request I have that I didn't get in the initial draft when I was reading it over this morning. We didn't make much change until we get to item number 23. We amended to allow the council to vote on the same evening or take matter up under final consideration at a later date. We were not prescriptive about the date because we do understand that sometimes you have a controversial matter and you might want to hold it in committee for an extra week, an extra 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, etc. So we're not prescriptive about the timing between public hearing and final consideration, but we did enable that here. Effective date of ordinances and resolutions. You know, as I look at this, I'm going to say that this is kind of a weird spot for this particular rule. And rule number 25 about the mayor's, oh, wait a minute, I want to go up to rule number 23. I missed something here. Adoption of ordinances. We amended to allow the council. Oh, no, I did talk about that. Sorry, rule number 25. So we've updated rule number 25 here with respect to the mayor's absence. The council president's presiding officer may perform the duties of mayor. This used to talk about the council president being able to sign documents that the mayor wishes to allow them to sign, and that is not what state law says. So we're just mirroring the state statute here. I will note that this is a weird spot for this, so I'm going to put a pin in that.
Maybe it needs to
just
be
noticing that right now is like effective date of ordinances and resolutions, and we talk about council president's role. So we might find a different place for that. Council president's role in weird place. All right. And I'll put a move. All right. Administration of oaths under rule number 28. That's something that I handle. So we took it out. We're proposing to take that out. It used to say that the council president will make arrangements for the administration of office. City clerk role. Number 30. So we didn't change anything about being absent from the city for officers and electeds. That's a statute, and this is how we implement it. In Rule 30, this is how you appoint a new elected official. So if you have to fill the judge's seat, you have to fill a board seat, you have to fill a mayoral seat. And we updated it to reflect current practice. So we, since these rules have been instituted written and verbal questions. We have the concept of draw the name. You know, council members can have always been able to enter names of folks that they wish to interview. That's always been the case. The interview order we imagined as being drawing names from a hat. So that's been placed into the rule because that is our current practice. Let's see, what else have we said here? Voting is accomplished by name. So that wasn't clear in the rules, but this is one of those cases where you take nominations and then the voting is by name. And then, you can see where we have all these roll call votes that this has been a difficult thing in the past, not with you all, thank goodness. It's been very difficult in the past to appoint a city council person. So we left that language alone here in case we ever run into that situation again about the order of the roll call voting. So I'll leave Rule 30 here and see if there's any questions about it. I feel like
I'm not seeing any questions. We don't have much time left, but I think we're just about done too. So
we are we're just about done.
Hang on. We've got a question.
Yeah,
Sandra.
Sorry about that. So this is something that's just kind of popped up in my head. Since we have to address, if I had something like a grievance or something with all of council, and I wanted to address all of council at the same time, instead of like not in email, but like in person or over Zoom, when would be an appropriate time to do that? I'm not saying that I have one, but just in case I did in the future.
And Marty, maybe just note that I don't know if there's a mechanism for that or not, or if there has been historically. And we're basically out of time. So let's just note that issue. Okay.
I don't know the answer to that question. I do have a clarifying question I'd like to ask if I may. Sure. Sandy, are you referring to you as a council member or you as a member of the public or both?
Me as a counselor.
Got it.
Great. Okay. Brian?
Not a question. I know we're out of time, but I just have a couple comments whenever you want me to say them.
Okay. I think we're just about to the end with Marty. We're just going to go a few minutes late here because this has been a big chunk of good work to get done. So Marty, keep going. I think we're just about done, right?
Okay. I'm going to give it, I'm going to go quickly. Rule number 31. Generally, we are incorporating the city's JEDI initiative, including trying to include inclusive language, provide more flexibility around appointments, in particular reappointments of board members who've been serving a long time and want to continue. We've imbued that discretion to the chair of the committee. City Clerk's office will work very closely with the chair to assess whether a board member who is currently serving is interested in serving, whether we want to open the process up, etc. We've imbued the chair with responsibilities associated with reviewing application forms, interview questions, and ensuring those align with the city strategic initiative around justice, equality, diversity, and inclusion. And we've asked the committee chairs to identify outreach groups for the city clerk office that we might do to accomplish those goals. And we added language. Council members were very complimentary of the process that staff developed for the Affordable Housing Resident Oversight Committee and that appointment process. And so we've incorporated language from that, as well as updated some of your procedures in terms of talking about appointments. This is very prescriptive down here related to the dismissal of a human rights case in the past, but we did update being able to talk about an appointment and included the language from our legal discrimination ordinance here. And we've clarified here that voting is by name. So rather than saying I move to appoint X and so to a board, that the process now would be to take nominations for that board and go through and make that selection by who gets the most names called, rather than voting up or down on a particular person. And then finally, I'm going to just jump to rule number 32 because we're short of time. We've removed specific positions related to departments because they've become outdated. We have added the city officers listed in state law and retitled it based on the city attorney's recommendation. He noted that there is a difference. Sometimes we're confirming the mayor's appointments, and other times the state statute says that you are in the role of advice and consent, which is different than just confirmation. And so we have clarified that vis-a-vis the state law in rule number 32. And that's it.
Thank you. We are over time. I'm just going to be really brief and call out one additional issue that we'll pick up in January that was not baked enough to go into this. And that is that we've got 6 council chairs, 6 committees, but frankly, quite a spectrum of workloads underneath those committees. And I think we are trying to figure out how we can rebalance them a little bit to more evenly spread the work around. So that would probably be addressed in the rules. That will be in January with new council. If people have more issues that they spot or more thoughts, please email me or Jordan or Marty. We'll be gathering those in, but I appreciate everyone painstakingly going through the rules today. We had Brian's hand was raised earlier. Did you want to comment? And then Jordan.
I'll go after Jordan if that's okay.
Okay, Jordan?
Yeah, I was going to ask people to specifically spend some time on Rule 31. I think that that's one that would really benefit from everyone really considering it and coming back in January. And members that are leaving, if anyone wants to weigh in on that, we would certainly appreciate it. I think that the ability to not have to dispense with a yes or no motion, you know, I nominate a motion to appoint person A and all of that, the nomination and voting by name, I think really allows us to do more justice to the appointment process rather than just the first person to make a motion gets it has an advantage. And so I'd encourage people to take a look at 31 and provide feedback later on after the meeting.
Thank you. And Brian.
I just wanted to quickly say thanks to Marty for all her work on this. We're blessed with your expertise and experience and history and all of this. And Jordan and Gwen, this can be a mind-numbing process in all honesty to go through. And so without Gwen and Jordan and Marty's ushering efforts, we wouldn't even be to this point. And the last thing I'll say, and I think it's really a good process to get some feedback in this council and then, you know, work through this and approve with the new council. Relative to decorum at meetings and public participation, I would simply ask that you all think about the effect of behavior on other people wishing to participate in their democratic process, and that the decorum ought to be such that everyone in the room feels, or online in this case as well, feels comfortable getting up, whether virtually in person, and giving public comment. And that's sometimes a consideration that gets lost in the back and forth. So I hope that the new council gives that sufficient consideration, and thanks.
Thank you. There's no public comment. We are 7 minutes over time. Thank you everyone for indulging me, but this is important and it takes a lot of time, and we will revisit it in January to be continued. No other comments, so we will stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone.